Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I'll be reading 4 true encounter stories with the cryptid known as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Now, all these are compelling and fascinating, but the last one takes us all the way to Faulk, Arkansas. And that story you'll be thinking about long after the video's over. So if you're ready, strap on your boots and let's ride to Bigfoot country. Number 1. Dear Biker, my dad says he saw Bigfoot when he was 17 years old. He was hunting in another neighboring rural county, Carter County. Carter County has a place called Carter Caves State Park. Carter Caves in eastern Kentucky is part of a larger cave system called Mammoth Caves. Only a small portion of this system has been explored, though it is still huge. He was on the other side of Carter Cave State Park, just outside of it, not in the park itself. He went out about 4 a.m. Dawn was approaching, and it was getting brighter, just enough to see all around him. He was in his homemade tree stand, lying on his belly, propped up on his elbows. A little less than half a football field away, maybe 30 to 40 yards, he saw 3 of these creatures. He said one looked like it may have had a baby on its back because he saw a moving lump. They were all black or really dark brown, and one had bits of gray. He was just inside a tree line that surrounds a large meadow up at the top of the ridge. Deer will graze in that meadow early. He said they were farther in than him, and the ground was sloping downhill, so one may have looked shorter than the other. He told me 2 things I'll never forget, though. First, he said he compared what looked like the larger one to the high diving board at a pool. It was about 3 feet taller than that, and the high dive was just a standard 10 feet. The other thing was he said that they acted like a human, and they didn't make any verbal sounds, but it was like he was watching people, not animals. He mentioned that he watched them for about a minute, and I asked him if they looked at him or knew he was there. He said he didn't know, but he said for something that big that they're awfully quiet. He didn't hear much, and after it was over, he didn't hear anything else. He said it could have been because all he could hear was his heart pounding and that hum that goes along with fear. He later went back to the spot that he saw them, looked at the surrounding trees to determine height. Then he went back again with his brothers. This was in the early 1970s, and I've been to the area as well. I tried to go back some years later, but my dad said the property had been passed down to a granddaughter of his acquaintance, the property owner, and that he couldn't drive up there or ask. When he said that it was like they were people, that's what always intrigued me. He passed away in 2014, and I'd love to hear that story one more time. He only shared it with one other person after he was older. I always wondered when I visit the caves if they live deep down in them, if they know all these easy, secret ways to enter them. And I'll always wonder if they knew that he was there in the tree stand watching them. Signed, Levi. Number 2. Hey TB, in the 1980s, my dad was stationed at the Almeda Naval Air Station near San Francisco. He and some of his shipmates decided to go camping while on leave. They drove to a sporting goods store, I believe near Berkeley, to get what they needed. While there, they met with 2 professors from the University of Berkeley. Apparently, these 2 professors were greenhorns, as my dad called them, and knew nothing about camping or supplies, so they asked my dad to help them pick out what they needed. Then they told my dad that a logging company had contacted them at the university, asking them to come up to Northern California and investigate some large animal that's been destroying things in one of their logging camps. They told my dad that someone or something was causing havoc in the area, and the workers couldn't get anything done. Basically, it was starting to scare the workers. My dad explained to the professors that he and his family operated as hunting guides in western Colorado, so he was very skilled at tracking. They asked if he and his buddies wanted to come with them and help track. Now, I don't know exactly where he said they went, but I do remember it was near the California-Oregon state line, and I believe close to the ocean, but I could be off on that detail. He said when they got to the camp and scouted the area, they found several giant footprints and plaster cast of them. He said it looked like something or someone was scouting or walking around the perimeter of the camp. He went on that the workers took them to a fuel depot where there were several footprints up to a collection of 55-gallon drums of diesel fuel. Something had walked up to and then around the depot, and then finally picked up one of the barrels, carried it off towards a nearby ravine. He said that the footprints became significantly deeper as the creature walked away from the fuel storage area, which would indicate that whatever had picked up the barrel had carried it without setting it down, and then threw both the barrel and also a large tractor tire into the ravine, and then it walked back into the woods. That night they had a fire going, and everyone was sitting around it drinking beer and shooting the breeze. After a while, my dad said he noticed eyeshine that appeared to be 8 to 9 feet high just outside the firelight watching them. He told me that he'd quietly work his way back from the group. Then he circled around the camp as quietly as he could to try and sneak up on whatever was standing close by. He said that no matter how hard he tried, he never could get anywhere near whatever creature had the eyeshine, and that it really frustrated him as a professional tracker because he couldn't get close to the animal. He had returned to the group, and 10 minutes later the eyeshine would return and he'd quietly try again. Over the years, I asked him several times, "Do you think that was a Bigfoot?" Immediately, he would respond, "Well, no, I can't say it was a Bigfoot because I never actually saw the animal. However, we did find some very large tracks. I know that there was something really big out there that's a much better tracker than me. And whatever it is, it had really big feet." But what we saw out there? Well, I have no idea what it was. Now, my dad was telling me the truth or spinning a yarn. Honestly, I don't know. However, I'm going to say that he was telling the truth about something. As I've always thought about his story, I've come to the following conclusions. He saw something in Northern California that he could neither catch nor track, which really frustrated him as a professional tracker. He never altered the major parts of his story. He may have added some detail or forgot to share certain points, but they were incidental. He never claimed to have actually seen a Bigfoot. If he had, maybe he would have bragged about it. I've wondered if the story grew out of the Patterson-Gimlin encounter. Maybe, but there's nothing, at least to me, that screams that. But I could be wrong. Signed, Jared. Number 3. Hey TB, this occurred around 1998 or 1999 to a close friend of mine who just recently brought it up again, which compelled me to write in. I usually don't like to recount other people's stories, but my friend would never be the type to share his experience with you or any other individual he didn't personally know, so here I am. My friend's family lived on a busy street in Wayne, New Jersey. Behind the house was a pool with a deck and a yard with a wooded area beyond. One summer afternoon, he, his brother, and his mom were sitting around the pool on the deck when they heard an unusual rustling up a tree on the fringe of the wooded area. Looking up, they saw what my friend described as a large, brown, gorilla-like creature. It was perched on a branch while vigorously shaking another smaller branch above it, which was causing the loud ruffling sound that had caught their attention. As they stared at this thing, dumbfounded, they were close enough to realize that it was staring back at them as it shook the branch. Then, after about a minute, it dissolved into the treetops and deeper into the woods. It was the summer, so they quickly lost sight of it among the leaves and didn't dare trail it into the woods due to the freakiness of it all. The next day, I was invited over to hang out and go swimming at his pool, and that's when he told me about what had happened the previous day. As he was telling me, he pointed out the tree and branch on which the gorilla appeared. It was a towering tulip poplar, and the branch which he pointed out had to be 50 to 55 feet high. I asked him why they didn't call the police, and he said that if they ever saw it again, they would. To this day, my friend will say that he and his family still don't know what it was, but in the same breath, he'll also say it had to be a guy in a gorilla suit, because there's no other explanation. If it were a guy in a gorilla suit, he would have had to have been extraordinarily athletic, since he would have had to climb over 50 feet in a suit and then maneuver from tree to tree. I also asked him if it could have been someone's pet monkey, but he said it was way too big and was definitely either an ape or a person dressed like one. There are no zoos remotely close from which a gorilla could have escaped, and if there were such an animal on the loose, I'm sure it'd have been big news. I suppose we'll never know who or what it was in the treetops of Wayne that day. Thanks for reading. Signed, Keith. Number 4. Dear Biker, my father is a couple of months out from turning 80, and he's just had to go into a nursing home after being in my care since 2019. I've been thinking about him and his life and wanted to share this story that comes out of Faulk, Arkansas. The Faulk monster has a long history of sightings. If you want the full story, aside from my father's, just do a little research and you'll find a lot. The sightings began before the term Bigfoot was really coined and recognized, but it is essentially a Bigfoot. Since my father's story occurred in the 1949 to 1950 era, it may be one of the earliest accounts of the Faulk monster ever. Maybe even the first, though I haven't researched it enough to say that for sure. Living deep in the woods in Faulk, my father and his siblings experienced the Faulk monster on more than one occasion in a very strange way. Now, my father is a quiet, humble, honest man, not an attention seeker and a man of few words. If this is a tall tale, then it's the only one that he's ever told. If he's ever lied at all, I can't recall it. I remember a bit of debate between him and my mom before even allowing the story to be told to us, just due to it being unexplainable and a little frightening. My father also lived a horrible childhood that's a part of this story, including abuse, starving, and never owning a pair of underwear or a toothbrush until he was 13, when he ran away and started patching tires to buy those things for himself. Once, when the kids complained that they were starving, their father fried a bar of soap and forced them all to take a bite while he laughed. Their father, now I don't call him Grandpa because I never knew him, once killed a migrant farm worker in front of the family and forced the kids to clean the blood out of his car after dumping the body in Red River. His father, in a drunken rage, once made the kids get out of the car and run in front of it at night, saying he would run them over if any of them stopped, and I believe he would have. My father never returned home after age 13 and made a good life for himself and our family. We owe him a lot for completely breaking that cycle of abuse. He was a good, moral man. Just a month ago, ridden with dementia, he told me it still makes him cry to this day what his father put him through. During the worst of the worst, the family became aware of something in the woods near their house. Dogs going wild, weird bumps in the night, just eerie things, but eerie enough to make his mother occasionally sit at the window at night with a shotgun. During this time, my father was about 6 to 7 years old and sharing a bed with his older siblings. They began having night visits of something none of them could explain. Keep in mind that Bigfoot wasn't a term yet, and the Faulk monster sightings were only documented many years after this. This is how my father describes it, and I won't jazz it up. They would hear the screen door to the house open. At the time, they had no AC, just windows and doors open with just screens. And then they would hear heavy footsteps coming down the hall. The kids, frightened and knowing their parents were asleep, would pull the sheet over their heads and would only barely peek out. When my dad did peek out, he saw a huge, hulking figure, taller than his father and taller than any man he had ever seen, just standing there at the bedside. Then my father felt a huge hand, so big that the palm covered his entire chest, with fingers extending over the side, patting him gently over the sheet. After patting him a couple of times, the hand slid over and patted his sister and then his brother the same way. As the hand moved over to his sister and brother, he described hair as long as a woman's hair, dragging across him, dangling from the arm. The heavy footsteps would then retreat and back out of the house. This repeated multiple nights throughout one summer, before my terrible grandfather moved the family to New Mexico. That's where the encounter ends. My dad ran away at 13 from New Mexico, hitchhiked to East Texas, and married my mom at 15. When they were in their 20s, stories of the Faulk monster began to circulate in newspapers, and my mom and dad were shocked. Although I can't name the specific farm or property without potentially putting out my family's identity, the family that lived on the property after they moved to New Mexico reported that the Faulk monster had come onto their front porch and ripped the screen door off. Make of that what you will. My father never wanted his story to be told. He never contacted the papers and never told anyone outside of a few trusted family members. He didn't want to be called crazy, and he also didn't want his abuse stories that coincide with the encounter to be widely known. Once we begged him to ask my aunt about it, and he did when she visited. Her reaction was strange to say the least. She instantly turned pale, huffed and puffed, and said, "I don't think we should talk about that." He didn't push it, and it was never mentioned to her or by her again. I can't ask my dad's brother about it because, well, he turned out to be just like his father, and I've never met him and never will. Thank you again, Dad, for protecting us from the things that you went through. When my mother deemed it was okay to tell us this story, my brother and I were teenagers. At the time, it scared us so bad that my mom had to sleep with me and my dad with my brother. My dad, half asleep in the middle of the night, reached over to pat my brother to make sure he was still in bed. My brother, fresh from the Bigfoot story, woke up to being patted and screamed. Well, anyways, that's the story. Thanks for letting me share. Signed, Carter. And there you have it, all I have for tonight. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these experiences down in the comments below, but please, keep it respectful. And if you have a story or encounter that you'd like to share, just send it to the address in the description, and your story may end up in a future episode. Thanks so much for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.